On. And we are recording. I just took my glasses off and I'm like, why can't I see shit? That's why I can't see shit. We're recording on Monday, November 3rd, 2025 at 10:13 a.m. Eastern time with Mr. E.M. Burlingame. You guys know him. Go in the description. Go get all his YouTube, Twitter, all the writing, Substack, Patreon, even I don't know what you have and all that stuff. It's all in there. Get his books, all the links are in there. Go give the man a couple shekels and Mr. Waters, who I only know through EM. So John, could you please introduce yourself and then we'll just kind of wing. What were we talking about beforehand? EM, when you were like, let's start on that topic. Capitulation never works. Bending the knee never works. Talking about
Which ties into
censorship.
women have taken over
And
everything,
John was
which
just
John
telling us
just
how
said.
women have taken over art. So, John, you introduce yourself, and then I'll put your links in the description and stuff.
All
But you
right.
introduce yourself, and then we'll just wing it.
Okay. My name is John Waters. I'm a writer. I'm Irish. I live in Ireland, and I've been doing this for a long time. I was a journalist in the mainstream for a long time. Then I quit because it became so corrupt about a decade ago. And I also playwright from time to time and songwriter and whatnot. But I've been the last few years. I've been completely fixated on what's been happening. Under the guise of what's called COVID, but it's not really COVID. It's everything except COVID, because there was no COVID. And so I've been following that, and I had a book out about 6 months ago called "The Abolition of Reality: A First Draft of the End of History." It's my 11th book. I wrote a lot of different books about different stuff, mainly about Ireland actually, because I'm kind of fixated on Ireland, and never more so than now because it's being destroyed by its government, duly elected government. That seems to be their job as they see it now, to absolutely take a sledgehammer to the nation that they were charged with actually protecting. But there you go. And we might talk about that. I don't know, that's kind of it. I'm on Substack, johnwaters.substack.com, and I write there occasionally, and I put up videos when I make them, and I write a diary at the weekend. That's it.
Beautiful, and I'll put those links in the description. And but yeah, we were just talking beforehand about how, and you made a good point. Some people have gone on shows where, in hindsight, it's like, yeah, that their YouTube channel supports their wife and kids, and more importantly, and it's like just maybe checking my own ego, regardless of what it is, it's just you're on someone else's show. If they say don't talk about COVID, they'll talk about COVID. It's more of a respect thing. So I'm realizing in
Yes.
hindsight how much of a douchebag I am. That being said, and then being a total hypocrite, as I was telling you guys, I'm like, man, I could never. And I would hear that, I would just look. I mean, you feel like you're in middle school. You're like, you can't say the bad word. Like, dude, shut the fuck up. And it's, again, I get it. It's your business pain. Okay, everything. But the idea, and this might just be me taking it way too far, but the idea that you're gonna appease them has never worked ever, 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 ever in the history of forever. And it just kept going on YouTube. It just got getting tighter. And we can't talk about the election. You couldn't even mention how there's like neo-Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, it was getting wild, and they've switched back since Trump's in office. But I mean, even that, you can tell it's just because it's the way the wind's blowing. But yeah, it does not work, and it never works. And just the very once you start, you've created a psychological acceptance. You're literally wiring your brain. You're starting a new thing to go, this is a route to move forward through space-time on this planet. And that's how you need to look at it, is the same reason I go to the gym with 30 minutes of waking up. I don't allow myself to go, well, maybe not today, because that snowballs. Surrender never works, capitulation never works, and it's yeah. But EM, where'd you want to take that other than then doesn't
Well,
work.
I think we'll go to John here because where is Ireland right now, which is, leading the fray, shall we say, in total and absolute capitulation.
Suicidal
Yeah.
empathy, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's estrogen. It's estrogen in everything, males included.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, well, I mean, you think about it. I mean, what we kind of forget when we talk about YouTube is we forget what we already know, which is that it is them. It is they. That is what YouTube is like. It always was. So, in a certain sense, we kind of slip into this kind of mode of thinking it's a kind of a platform, or it's a
Yeah, yeah.
maybe even a neutral platform, of course, which it never was anyway. But it wouldn't be, would it? Because it's owned by them, and they only allow us on certain conditions. We go on knowing those conditions and thinking we can somehow cheat them and get something over their shoulder, and back into the back of the net, which sometimes happens, but not often. So that's kind of the way that one goes. But yeah, Ian, yeah, Ireland is in bad shape. And you're dead right. I mean, there's an emasculation process that's been going on for years. I've been writing about this actually and getting into enormous trouble for 30 years, going way right back to the mid 90s when I started talking about family law courts and male suicide and raising these things. And I mean, I used to think, well, this is when I stumbled on these things first, um, I kind of thought, oh, this is because I was a lefty liberal, and I thought, oh yeah, this is going to really give my mates you know, some more work to do. They missed this one. They obviously, it just slipped past them. But I'm going to tell them now how terrible it all is, and this is possibly the worst injustice, the worst realm of injustice I've ever seen in one place, and they're going to come running with me to rescue everybody from this horrible abuse and dishonesty and uh, brutalization and so on. And I started telling them, and then they kicked my head in, and they've been kicking my head in ever since. And it took me a long few years to figure out why. Like, because it seemed to tick all their boxes, justice and fairness and equality and decency and all those things, and so I then it's only recently that I realized what it was all about. I mean, of course it's very elaborate thing, but not so much how it is all about, but that one of the things it was centrally about was preparing the machine for what's happening now. So they were just the men were just like lab rats being tested for example, how far can we go with them before they break? How far can we go with them before their friends will join in on their side? Well, the answer to that is actually forever, by the way. Your friends never join in on your side in these battles because that would make them a misogynist, wouldn't it? And they wouldn't want that. They would want that a lot less than they want you to be their friend, and so on. So all this stuff. So as a consequence of that, we're rearing and other aspects. We're rearing like generation after generation of men who are hardly worthy of the name. Like they just young men go around the place wearing white ankle socks, and that's about the best thing about it. Uh, it's horrific, and you can see it then in everything, in every single thing that happens. Uh, you know, like even something which is really extraordinary. Consider like that. Women now read, I think something like 80% of books are read by women. Like, what is that about? Well, if you're going to a bookshop, you can see what it means. It's all chicklit in that you can't get in the front door with it. Um, Theatre the same. The theatre is the same. Theatre is all now about women. It's serving women. The audiences are women. The actors are women. The playwrights are women. You know, uh, Yet all the great playwrights in history have been men up to like a few years ago, and yet here we are. And this is not coincidental. I mean, it's such an elaborate matrix of of radical in the new sense, not in the old sense of rootedness, but in this kind of far out extremist kind of thing. It's one of it really is everywhere you go, it's connected. And I realize now, looking back on what I was writing about 30 years ago, that I was over a target but didn't know there was a target. I didn't know that what I was onto was the big thing that it was coming because I didn't know there was a big thing coming. And now it's here. I just about kind of understand, even though I wasn't one of the people who kind of was, what let's say, tuned into 9/11 or stuff like that. I didn't see that kind of stuff. But I was on top of this all the time and obsessed with it. And indeed, being accused, I was the guy who was, in the parlance of my colleague, so-called, the guy who was always banging on about fathers, and I was, and still am, because the thing, nothing's been fixed. They brought in gay marriage and gay parenting and gay families and gay everything, but they haven't brought in a law that will protect the relationship between a father and a child anywhere in the world that I'm aware of.
Well, they've done quite the opposite.
Yes,
Put many laws in place and rulings because we're a common law system. And in a common law system, you don't even have to create a law. You just have to rule in a certain way using a precedent. And you just build on that precedent. And now somebody, back to your school you were talking about, where they want the bibliography and the citations right, rather than
yes,
the quality of the playwriting. Um, in common law, you don't even need a law. You just need rulings on the law that skew a certain way, and then you need enough of those rulings so that when somebody's citing some such and such versus such and such with a date, and you've got enough of those, well, now it's real. Now this is the law of the land. No, it isn't. It's some asshole that ruled in some way, probably incorrectly, possibly quite even against the law, but they were sitting there in one of those wigs, or the equivalent here in the United States, and they got the precedent in. And then all the little assholes that come along later are relying on that precedent. It's the same thing in most of social science, academia, in psychology, et cetera. It's all these self-referential papers.
To
yes.
interrupt for 2 seconds,
Yeah,
back to the once you start surrendering, you've created a neural precedent where
correct,
your brain's like, well, we did it that one time and we didn't die. But
correct.
keep going, yeah.
No, Tommy, that's actually brilliant because that's exactly right. So the thing about a civilizational people is that precedent is absolutely essential, right? But it is absolutely essential that the precedent was got right. And later on, if the precedent wasn't got right, a fight was picked over it until it was that set
Well,
of precedents, that circular referencing was done away with. And we're like, no, no, no. Here's the actual code. Here's the law. Here's what we do in our civilization. Here's the actual precedent. Here's the supports for that moving forward. Yeah, go ahead, both of you.
well, yeah. You see, this is a syndrome that has been very acutely obvious now in the last while. If you're paying attention in the law, that what you actually have in the way of judgments from a lot of these courts is, it's almost like, those kind of old arithmetic books where you give you the answers at the back of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's like they've got one of those and they know what the
yeah,
answer is. So then they construct the equations in order to make that answer come out.
yeah.
And the thing about it is, what's absent from that, in the old days, that wouldn't have passed muster because there would be
Correct.
smart journalists, commentators, analysts who would take it apart.
Academics. Yes,
Yes, who would absolutely rip it next
yes,
day, even,
yes,
or next Sunday, or what.
yes.
And that doesn't happen anymore. So what actually we do see is when you hear these judgments on, you hear an outline of them, it's not an explanation of what it is. But so you have to go and get the judgment, and then you start reading it and you realize, oh my God, this is
It's
like just like
trash.
it's
It's
trash. It's
trash.
just
Yeah,
cobbled together from
yeah,
illogic, but
yeah.
it's made to look like they do all these bizarre kind of like sums and multiplications or something like, and you think, well, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. Like I remember reading one there in Ireland which actually proved that the unborn child was not a child. Even though they were calling it the unborn child, it still wasn't a child. And nobody said, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And that changed the entire tapestry of rights for the child, with the result that they were then able to bring abortion in completely unlawfully, by the way, because they don't have the right to dispense with anybody's right,
Yes.
including the right of an unborn child.
Yeah. Yes.
I was gonna say there. I've always loved not really architecture, skyscrapers and shit. And I'm just watching a little like 5-story building go up across the street, and yeah, I always think it's interesting. You see how quick it's going up, but I walked by and I was just watching, and of course, they're every time they build one floor, you build it so quickly, it's all wood, but you can see they're doing the laser measurements, right? Because what you can't do is you go look at the brick sidewalks in Portland. They've been warped over 200 years, which is fine because it's a sidewalk, but they're smooth and whatever. But when you're building something, you have to laser measurement each time you're going up. It's like building Legos. If you build off one floor, you go, well, we got to stop this because then all the weight above it is going to be misweighed. And it's also not something where the magnitude of it can kind of gloss over it. Like in the movie Letters from Iwo Jima, there's a giant naval convoy going to, I guess, Iwo Jima, and a guy falls overboard. And they're like, we gotta stop these boats because this guy's gonna drown. He's in the middle of the Pacific. And they keep going. They're like, and like, I don't know, the captain's like, what the fuck do you think this is? Like, this is war. That guy's gone. Sorry. That's an example where something so big you can kind of gloss over it. There are other things where there are skyscrapers in China and I believe even Dubai where they kind of said fuck it with like the laser measurements to make each floor perfectly aligned. It took a couple years, but the investors found out, independent people, and now they're just vacated. And it's God knows how many hundreds of $1 millions you've sunk in it. So my point is where some things you can gloss over, there are other things where you have to come back to it because everything on top of it is bullshit. And that's what you're saying about precedent. There's bullshit because
Yes.
just keep building, keep building. Yeah, we're just gonna keep building. It's like at some point, and if it's not you, and the floors you could say are years. So 50 floors later is 50 years later. Eventually, it starts to get a little, and you have to address it. And so if your precedent is something like what if one of the amendments is like, and we get our power from the government, not from God. Well, that's going to eventually, you're going to see it, maybe in a century, maybe in 2 centuries, it's going to implode on itself. That's the important of precedent.
So
What
this
is
is
it?
the, yeah, go ahead, John. Yeah.
So I just want to say that one of the hold that thought, Ian, but I just
Yep.
want to say that you see, there's a fundamental thing here that we're missing, and we've mentioned it already. It's that the press isn't just the press. The press isn't just an industry that produces news and entertainment and
Well,
information.
yeah,
That's not what it
it's
is.
an arm
It's
of the power elite. Yeah.
Uh,
no, well, let's say what it's supposed to be first. It's supposed to be the fourth estate, which is that it represents the people and it prosecutes the people's interests at all times and it defends the people against the abuses of power and it makes power accountable. That's what it's supposed to be. That ceased completely. And the problem is that nobody put out a bulletin or put it on the news on the headlines that that actually had happened. That was the biggest news story probably in the history of the world. We're no longer going to do our job. Journalists
well,
signed journalists.
that's because of the incentive structures and who pays their bills, right?
Well,
This is
it's only partly that, Ian, because I know what you mean, but I don't think that's the full story. Because I remember a time, for example, in Ireland, we always had a national broadcaster, a state broadcaster, but when it started back in the early 60s, it was actually very good. Now, it is very limited in the sense that it was just one channel, it was in black and white, it had only about 6 or 7 real broadcast hours a day, but it did good news, it did good current affairs, it did good drama, and those kind of things. Uh, and there was good people working in it. Good, conscientious, intelligent, talented people were attracted to that. That stopped. I think one of the critical factors is that journalism, the journalism school has been the most disastrous development in the whole history of journalism. Because far in the old days, when you had people working in their local papers, becoming apprentices, they were sent out to the courtrooms and they did court reporting and they did crime reporting, ringing up the cops every at midnight and so on and so on, and then they cut their teeth on that, and then they maybe got promoted and started to write columns or do features or whatever, and then they ended up maybe in the national papers, and each one in the newsroom was different. There were all kinds of oddities because they had come from all these different. Now they're all coming from the same place, and they're going to the same place to be brainwashed, and so in a certain thing, it's not the money. The money, of course, sweetens it for them, and they're going to keep in there for doing it. But to begin with, they're very limited people. They're not suited to the job. They have no talent in the most instances, and they don't care. They're ideologically committed in a very superficial and
but
stupid way, and they don't care about the consequences of what they're doing.
so I think that's all true. I do believe, however, it's about incentives and incentive structures, and there's no incentive anymore for the rebel. The rebel's ostracized,
Yeah,
right?
that's it. That's
So,
it.
and then there's another piece that's even far more critical, and this is in my second life when I went into special forces. Um, the unconventional thinker is not a thing you can actually commodify. The moment you put it into a formal structure or formal system, it is no longer an unconventional, it's conventional. So if you are going to, and the problem is in the post-World War II era, everybody has to have a speciality and a pedigree for most people.
Yes.
And that requires you go through some commodification process. Well, now you're a commodity. You're not an unconventional. It's the thing that always got me that just was like, you're in school, you're in university, you're studying some formal system, and they tell you to think outside the box.
Mm,
It's like, well, I'm in a box. I'm in a box within a box, the Russian Machinka dolls, I think they're called, right?
mm.
It's like I'm in a box within a box within a box. And the moment I actually step outside and think outside the box, I fail because
Yeah.
you're the one grading me. And you're somebody who, as an academic, as a professor, as a teacher, et cetera, your entire life is boxes nested within boxes.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I can testify to that because I came into journalism via a very odd path. Well, not particularly odd, but music journalism. I would rock music, and I
Mm.
got to a music paper like that. And then I went to other kind of slightly lefty, magazines, entertainment magazines, but also with cultural elements and political elements. And then I ended up an editor of one of those, and then an editor of another one. And and then I drew the attention of the mainstream and said, oh, this guy, well, let's get him in. And so I got a job with the Irish Times, and I thought, oh yeah, okay, well, but the editor when he brought me in said, no, I don't want you coming in here just doing the same old stuff as these other kind of laggards around the newsroom. He said, I want you to do the stuff that you've been doing, and I said, sure, no problem, that'll be great, delighted. First time I did it, they went crazy. Literally crazy, like because it was just a nonsense thing. I went off down the country and wrote about four towns and cut them to ribbons because they were shitholes, right? And one of them was the editor's hometown, so that didn't help. But they then from then on they put somebody on me. They marked me from the editor's office every time I
That's
wrote an
trouble.
article. They
Yeah.
rang me up and they went through the article line by line with me and asked me, where did you find that out? How do you know that? Can you verify that? What have you evidence of this? And all the things they never did with anybody else. And until they and then one day, Eamon, this is the amazing thing. I noticed that I hadn't got a phone call. I'd written an article and I hadn't got a phone call. And then the next day I did one and I'd got no phone call either. And I said, oh, my first thought was, oh well, they're off my back. Great. And then my second thought again was, I'm already doing what they want. And that's when I started to interrogate myself. And I realized, yes, they had trained me into, like a dog, into actually. So they wanted me there as the name of the rebel, but they wanted me not to be a rebel in that role. But still to be able to call me, oh, that guy, he's a rebel. Yeah, he's a rebel.
A box
Yeah,
within a box.
yeah.
Yes.
And that's so I started to kind of fight against that, and then my life got really difficult because every other day they were trying to fire me. There was demonstrations to the editor's office by feminists and all this sort of stuff. And but I hung on for a good few years until it was the LGBT mob that got me in the end. But well, I got a good run, and it was very educational and still is. And I now see how the world. I can see all this stuff. It was all stuff that is germane to where we are, as you know.
So a wonderful career too, by the way, and particularly the time you went through. Nobody could do that today.
No.
Um, I want to go back to something previous, and then you just triggered something else, another thought in my mind, but which is related. there are precedent, so as we become a as we become a culture, this homogenized culture of experts, right? Pedigreed experts, we have lost our connection with our civilization, which is this mix of cultures. And I don't mean, diversity as people say, but, you know, the English speaking peoples, as we've talked about before, five main different ethnic groups and different linguistic groups with thousands of years of individual and competing history, et cetera. So, you know, um, our civilization is all of the precedent outside of the law where we've had to get things right, where we've had to adjudicate things as a people, but not within the confines of the law, right? Not a thing. And this is the other thing in the age of experts. Everything's been reduced down to law. Well, only cunts reduce everything down to law. The rest of us we're alive. The law is not alive. Nobody who lives the law, or constructs their existence around the law lives. We have we're human beings and we have all these other things. Well, that's what our civilization is. Our civilization, just as in the common law, which is important and is critical because there are times things rise to that level where we have to do it, we have to adjudicate, and we have to get the precedent right. And very much to what you're saying, when a precedent's wrong, at some point, Tommy, as you're saying, right, we have to go back before the whole edifice collapses, and we have to undo that error that happened that put that precedent into the narrative. Okay. Our civilization is that for everything, for everything. Our
Yeah.
civilization is that for social relationships. It is that for power relationships, for class interactions, family interactions, social norms, all of these things.
Yeah, but it's an amazing thing that what's happened to education in that culture is actually that people are educated out of reason.
Well, they're disconnected from civilization. They are put into a rigid, structured system that where civilization doesn't exist. It's not
Yeah.
real.
Yeah, and when you think about for take something like the COVID period, and I mean, I think this is a bit of a generalization, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not all as much, which is that it was working people who spotted this scam straight off,
Yes.
not
Yes.
the educated classes in general.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Now, it's very interesting. There's a brilliant philosopher called Matthew B. Crawford. He's in America someplace.
Mm.
He's written a number of really interesting books. He's also a motorcycle mechanic.
Mm.
And one of the things he's written is about the carpenter. He says that the carpenter is guided by his spirit level. In other words, the spirit level tells him what's true and what's not true. There's no spirit level for psychologists. There's no spirit level for scientists. There's no spirit level anymore for doctors because they don't even have to keep their patients alive anymore. It's not even a criteria. Uh, so we've actually created a two-tier society where, you know, which is completely inverted, where these so-called expert class, the educated class, look down upon the people who work with their hands, who make and mend the world every day and fix the world and cook the world and clean the world, right? They look down on them. And yet they're the people who adhere to the law of reality, the law of fact, the
The
law of truth.
civilization they keep.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are the civilization. And this
Correct.
essentially is what's happening in the world,
Yes.
that the uneducated classes claiming to be educated are claiming power on the basis of their degrees, their qualifications only, because it's not on their achievement and it's not on their actual reasoning and it's not on their talents. It's on the basis of the number of letters they have after their names. And the people they look down, as I say, on people who don't have letters after their names. And this complete inversion is destroying the world, unsurprisingly.
Servants have become the master, and they need
Yes,
to go back to the role of servant. So
yes.
we've been through all of the, again, this is why civilization matters. And a civilization is this record of precedent and all these other things than the law. We've been through all of these inversions before. I mean, you just look at history. But what got us through? What got us through was the ability for us to go back to some point in our shared history and go, no, 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 we had it right here. Let's figure out how to go back to this today in our time today. Well, who are the keepers of that? Generally, the keepers of that are very old upper class families and all of the lower classes and some of the middle class, the lower middle class. The problem that we have that is always inverting things is the upper middle class and the lower upper class who are always trying to, because the upper middle class is close enough to the upper class, they're trying to get there. And the lower middle class is part of the, or lower upper class is part of the upper class, and they want to be upper class.
Yeah.
And so we're always this is the thing historically, I keep coming back to civilization. The more and more, it's just like, holy cow, this is the thing that the upper middle class and the lower upper class are trying to always strip away, because the civilization is all these other ways for us to look and say, no, 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 we worked that out before. We fought that out 300 years ago. Right? Your family got reduced, or your family's in this position now because this is who you are for the last 400 years.
Well, that's right. And you see, one of the things as well is because what's in that civilization is what a lot of people through time have referred to as being God-given,
Yes.
right? Now, just to take that idea, let's call it just given, right?
Yeah.
And so that we don't make it controversial. And if something is given, that means that there's a certain absolute quality about it. But these people don't like that.
No.
So they dismiss all that stuff
No.
and try to make new stuff to replace it. And the new
Well,
place,
it's not to replace it, it's to elevate their status in the world artificially, because they can't elevate their status in the world organically.
yes, yes. You see, this is the extraordinary. The concept of religion, it's like a separate area. But it actually can't be a separate area because it's either true or it's not. And if it's not true, then of course nothing matters. But if it is true,
Uh,
then well, it's more complex than that. But just to
yeah.
deal with this aspect,
Yeah.
like you see that there are certain things in the world that are immutable and they're irreducible, and you can't reduce them, and you can't move them, and you can't just shift them around that way these people try to do, because that is the function of, let's say, God or the gods or the
The
higher power,
divine. Yeah.
divine, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
And the point about this is, I've always been saying to people is, if you want to really get into this, the most important thing to understand, let's not even fall out about whether you believe in God or not believe in God, or whether I do or don't. Let's just agree on one thing, that neither of us is God.
Yes.
That's the key to it.
Yes.
Because these people are acting like they are God, and that they're
Yes.
remaking the world and the reality of the world in plain sight on the basis that they don't like what was there before,
They don't
because
like
they
their
say,
station. They can't
yeah,
rise above their station.
yeah, and
Yes.
they've come up with all these concepts like superstition, etc., etc.
Or
So
or theory. So two other things, people, very much what you're saying, right? Two other things. Anytime you put the word neo in front of something, it's meant to invalidate. It's
yeah,
literally meant to be, well, this is a lesser form of a thing previous. It's like, well, it's either that thing still, or it's not something different.
Tommy,
So anytime they,
Tommy's a neo Democrat. No, he's fucking not. What are you talking
yeah.
about?
So it's like that's one of, and then the other one is, conspiracy theory, right? Or whatever theory. Well, actually, in the past, theories were things that had been through all of the bloody process, hypothesis and synthesis and all this process to get to this is the best understanding that we have, right? So give me 1 second. My understanding, and John is an Irishman and a writer and a deep thinker and the older generation, in which this thing began, if not did already broke, right? So I'm not a Christian. People know that. I went to Christian schools. I went to private boarding schools. I did all of that stuff when I was younger, and I'm not opposed to Christianity, etc. Um, and I'm neither the other, any of the Abrahamic belief systems, etc. I'm far more Scandinavian in my old Scandinavian in my beliefs, right?
Hmm.
One thing that is common, and I studied Zen Buddhism most of my life since I was very young, and Eastern philosophies, etc. And then I did all the science and mathematics and all that and technology and all that stuff too, right? And my sense is that there is that a civilizational peoples who the rare times in human history where a polity of people have actually developed a full-on civilization with all of its immense complexities and ever evolving pieces. What that civilization is a covenant with the divine between the peoples of that civilization, adherent to that civilization, and the divine, whatever the divine is. It's a divine commitment to whatever that greater being, presence, what beings, whatever it is, and through that with one another.
Yes.
And that when you're doing, and I've said this numerous times before, and I believe it fundamentally. And I actually, you as a poet and a writer, said I did a poem years ago. It's up on YouTube. I'll send you the link later, John, which you might enjoy. But while I am not necessarily in supporting monarchy and nobility, when we did away with monarchy and nobility, we did away with our covenant with the divine.
Yes.
And we did away, and we did it in the form of, well, it doesn't matter. When we did away with monarchy and nobility, we made ourselves the bosses, the rulers, the heads of everything, whether we were capable or not. What we didn't realize we were doing, I think the ones who brought it about knew, but what we as the people didn't realize is that when we did away with the prince, we also severed our relationship and our commitment to the divine. And we've been trying through this liberal democracy stuff, this nonsense, to try and replicate that. And no matter what we do, we cannot find a way as a people to reestablish our individual connections with the divine
Yes.
as a collective. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I mean it's the Prince thing is difficult to to explain in the world now, and but
Yes.
that's part of the problem you're addressing. I mean, that's what you're
Yes.
saying. Let's park that one for a moment. Like, and go back to the divine, which is, I think, the best way of it, because it's kind of a neutral term,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
sectarian ones and so on.
Yes.
And because this is not about sectarianism, and it's not about whether you're Catholic,
No.
Protestant, or anything like that.
No.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. The question is the thinking and what the fundamentals that you're addressing them are. And I think that recognition of the divine is essential to the survival of any human being in the world and of the world by extension.
Yes. Yes.
And and so that, like, we can agree that we don't even want to use any labels, or we don't want it
No.
doesn't
No.
matter. That's not what we're
Yes.
talking about.
Yes. Because
That's a
that'll start a
private matter.
fight we don't need to have.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a
Yes. Yes.
private matter. That's what you can
Yes.
pray to whoever you like in your house.
Well.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
for this, we need to keep our these things very simple, broad
Yes.
stroke.
Yes.
And that this has been a critical thing, you see, that because of the sectarian element and all of that squabbling and the neo-atheists and all the
Yeah.
rest of it,
Yeah.
and that there's this sense in which we're in sort of some post-divine world.
Yeah. Yes.
The problem with that is you can't be.
No. No.
You
And
cannot be.
you can't survive. There is no way to survive as a human being, probably
No.
even as a living organism, without a covenant, a functioning, working covenant,
Yeah,
individually and collectively with the divine.
and that's not hard to kind of explain or understand, because each one of us, EM, this is basic ABC, but each one of us came into the world not knowing where we came from, not knowing why we were here, and not knowing where we were going to go when we left this place. We just, we might develop all kinds of theories along the
Yeah.
way, but we didn't know, and we still
Conspiracy
don't.
theories. Yeah.
And we still don't know ultimately because
Yes.
there's a part of us which is we're a walking question mark walking around this planet trying to
Yes.
figure out what it's all about. And that question mark needs, like a plant needs water, needs feeding. And our culture is no longer capable of feeding that question mark.
No.
But that our people are slumping down. They're like, apes returning to apedom, or if ever they were in apedom in the first.
Yeah.
But so this is destruction. Like, and the amazing thing about it is when you see there's a lot of discussion now, Ian, about this in a very kind of like duck and divey kind of way, like the people, the Jordan Petersons and so on, who want their cake and they want to eat it because they don't really believe, but they won't say that. They don't believe in God, but they don't say that. They don't believe in the divine. The divine is a theory which is interesting. Uh, but the divine is true, even if it's not true. And the reason it is true is that there has to be something higher than us.
Well, it's true because there are moments, even in the most atheistic people, where they feel the divine.
Yes.
And, if you want to put it in terms of physics, they feel coherency. Things are
What,
coherent and noise is, the internal and external noise is reduced. And there's just this sense of, okay, or joy or even bliss.
but Ian, the only way you cannot think like that is to take everything for granted. To take
or
everything,
or or everything for factual
yes,
as absolute. Yeah.
but if
Yeah.
you stop yourself at any instant and look
Yeah.
around you and ask, what the fuck is all this? Where did this come out of? You can't not believe in something higher.
Far greater. So, John, I believe very fundamentally that a civilizational a people that are able to accomplish the types of things that the English speaking people have over the last 1,000 years, but really the last 400 years, is because we have for 1,000+ years, and actually going back to, traditions before the Romans came, etc.,
Yeah.
we are by nature we are a people who by nature, for whatever that may be, right, have always had until just the last 40 years or so, an unbelievably strong connection with the divine.
Yes.
And we've built cultures, the Irish culture, the Scottish culture, the Welsh, the Cornish, the East Anglian, right, the Cornwallian, the English, what would become the English. We
Well,
all have
yeah,
had this and no matter where we went in the world, we've always had this strong connection to the divine.
exactly. And the most beautiful buildings are the churches, the cathedrals, which are stretching up into the sky,
Some of the
trying
manor
to,
houses, like the
yeah,
old manor houses, were beautiful,
yeah,
right?
to touch that thing, to be
Yes.
connected to that thing with the energy that whatever that.
But I want to put it a slightly different way. That's for the grand scale. But if you go to some of the rural villages in Scotland and Ireland and Wales today, they still have the old houses from several hundred years ago,
Yes.
right? And Tolkien talks to this, and people are getting upset about Elon's statement about the Shire. Hell, I made that statement 2 weeks ago about at the end of the Lord of the Rings, the hobbits had to go back and fight to free the Shire. But the point I'm getting is that we don't need to look to the big, great demonstrations of this covenant with the divine and expression. Go to the small villages in England. Go to the small villages in Ireland, the old ones. Go to the small villages in Scotland, and you'll see the divine in the simplicity and yet the many centuries functionality and survivability. They're beautiful. You get a sense. I mean, if you go into them, not as a tourist, but you go to them as somebody who's steeped in our civilization, you
Yes.
just, or going to the rolling hills of the Midlands in England and seeing the cloud and the sun dappling of the sun falling on because of the intermittent cloud cover, etc. And there's just this feeling where you're just like, oh my God, I'm connected to
Dude,
something. I'm
you don't even, I was
right.
gonna say for New England, in America, here in New England, even in Portland, you walk downtown, and every once in a while you see a building and there's something peculiar, whatever, simple about it. I can't speak. And then you
Yeah.
see like the date when it was built, it's like 1808. And there is something when you just stare at it. And
Yes.
it does, and it's no, it's like it doesn't need to be, not that, cathedrals and mountaintops aren't beautiful, but there is somewhere you just look at that and you go, that I'm sure they replaced the window, but that hole where the window is, like that's just been there 60 years before the Civil War started. And
Yes.
there is something there. You touch it and
It
you're,
quiets you. It
yes,
grounds you,
it's like
right?
true and good. It's like simple. It's not ecstatic. It's not sexual. You just kind of look at it and you're like, it's the feeling when you're just sitting there, like, you can be with a couple people and everyone's quiet, just staring at the fire. And it's just
Yeah.
massaging your
The
soul.
divine, to me, in one way of expressing, terribly sorry, John, and I very much want to me, the divine, if you want to, again, back to the sectarians, how do we simplify? The divine is that which endures no matter what, and it's always there. And if you can quiet yourself and stop chasing and stop pursuing, you can see it here and there and you can feel it. And sometimes you can go some places or you can read an old piece of literature or even sometimes some to your old profession, read some journalistic works from the 1800s. Some of them were brilliant, extraordinary. And people got to realize some of the greatest works of literary works that we know today, that we revere today, were released as serials in newspapers,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. This is the thing, those buildings, I mean, no matter where they are, when you see a church, when you see a cathedral, when you pass it, you're drawn to it. I feel this, and that is the sense that you have, I have all the time.
Yeah.
There's a peace there that is like you're like a child in the arms of your mother.
Yes. Yes.
And
Very good.
you know
Mhm.
everything is okay. You know everything's okay. And the world has stolen that from itself
Yes.
to its condescension towards something it never understood in the first place, which is you used the word simplicity. Yes, it was a simplicity, but it was not a stupidity.
No, no, no,
No,
no. It's unbelievably sophisticated and comprehensive,
we
but
still
Yes.
it's
use
simple.
wheels.
But it's simple.
What
Yes.
about the wheel? Sometimes you
Yeah.
just hit it out of the park 10,000
And
years ago.
that's you see this the myth of progress creates this other myth of the ignorance of the past. But the past wasn't ignorant. It was just it saw things differently. It had a different perspective and a different way of explaining. And there were lots of things that it understood. I'm talking about the people that they understood, and they knew they didn't have to explain them. They didn't need explaining because they were obvious.
Because they
It was
endure. They
it was
endure. Yeah. Yeah.
it was obvious that I did not make myself. That is
Yes.
obvious. I don't, like I wouldn't be able to start. How would I make a fingernail? How would I make a hair? I don't know. And yet the condescension of these people assumes that they have all those powers.
Well, Nietzsche said this, right? That people would think themselves God. And
Hmm.
then eventually we'd realize, yeah, no, right? So I know we're getting up to about an hour. John, I want to
I
run
got
something
I got
by you.
nothing doing. It's up to you guys.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Um, I want to run something by you, John. Okay, a thought, and it's been much in my mind. Where we went wrong over a century ago, really starting in the mid 1800s, really probably the early 1800s, is we allowed liberalism to be hijacked.
Hmm.
Initially, it was we allowed the just the ludicrous contrarians to come in and self-label as liberals.
Yeah.
And then that led on inevitably to around just after World War One, where we allowed the insane in and to classify and clarify or label themselves as liberals.
Yeah.
And you could really see it in art uh, during the transition of art from this beauty to ugliness. And you can see it in Picasso alone. If you look at Picasso's early works, I mean, he was on the Rembrandt's level, and he was on some of the other great painters' levels. And then right around World War II, you can start seeing Cubism and all this other stuff. You can see it in music, this movement to jazz, which to me is just chaos, right? It's barely contained chaos and insanity. Um, Literature, works of literary. You also then start to see it to your point, in your old profession, journalism. We see it so it used to be that the liberal, classical liberalism, and I'm half Scottish, so the Scottish Enlightenment's, deeply seeped into me by my Scottish mother. So, um, but what we have to realize is that liberalism was not the destruction or the enemy of conservatism. They're companions, and you have
Yes.
to have both, and they have to be working in contestation, but also in mutual contemplation and progress and moving forward.
Yes, it's a tug
Liberal,
of war. It's a tug of
it's a
war.
tug of war, but it's one where the liberal very much respects the conservative, very much respects this covenant with the divine. And if that's becoming corrupted, we, the liberals, and I'm a very liberal person, uh, I don't know exactly how to label that anymore, but I was raised in that tradition, right? Let's say that, right? Particularly the old Scottish classical
Yeah,
liberalism,
so was
right?
people think I'm a conservative. I'm not a conservative.
No,
Uh,
no,
uh, I'm a long way from that. But it's impossible to actually explain yourself anymore in
yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think this is where I don't think conservatism has also floundered and lost and become this mostly just purely Christian religious thing. And the reason is that it lost its companion 150 years ago, 160 years ago. Of course, it's floundering. And neither one of them can find their footing again. And until one, we realize that we are companions, we're not enemies. We are companions, and we wouldn't have anything that the conservatives find of value today if it wasn't for the liberals throughout our history as well, and a balance between the two. But the problem that we have in the modern world is the liberals because we allowed ourselves to be hijacked 160, 180 years ago, and we've never addressed that as a liberal people.
I agree. The modern liberal hides behind the word,
Yes,
uh, because it's a kind of a get out of jail. I mean, it's
it's
like
a free
you,
pass. Yeah,
yeah, it's
from
wild.
the insane. Yeah,
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 liberals are wild in the game,
yes,
and so you can't question. But it's funny when I was a columnist in the Irish Times, and I stopped using the word liberal very early on because I found myself I was in a supposedly liberal newspaper, but there was always the scare quotes at that stage around the word.
yeah, yeah,
You saw them. As soon as you said it, you saw the scare quotes, and I started using this term pseudo liberal, which I think was much more accurate for what was actually going on. It was a pretend liberalism, which was hiding behind the liberal idea
yes,
in order
yes,
to push an agenda that was
yes,
deeply
yeah,
tolerant, deeply narrow-minded, deeply reactionary
yes,
in a very negative
yeah.
sense.
Which, by the way, is not conservative values either, and they all get labeled as that.
Yes,
Not
that's right.
that's not conservatism either. Conservatism is about maintaining the civilization, those
Yes.
precedents of things that have worked. That's the conservative's role. The
Well,
liberal's role is to test those things and to see, or back to your journalism, are those things corrupted now, or are they being corrupted? And if they are, how?
Well, you see, even though for a long time I was described as a conservative and I didn't demur from it, increasingly I came to realize that it was the wrong word and that the word I needed to describe myself with was the word civilizationalist.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yes.
It's not yeah, but like why have a
Yeah.
concern? Because when you've created madness, in the world, and then you're a conservative, what you want to keep madness,
Yes.
please?
Yes.
No, you want to go back. to what was there, to clean off
Yeah, we want
things.
to reset the social divine contract precedents that worked for our ancestors for hundreds
Yeah.
and hundreds and hundreds of years.
I reminded of a thing that happened when I was a child. We in our house that we just recently moved into this house, and there was a very long yard and garden and a shed in the halfway down, and beyond the shed there was like mud, right?
Mm.
And a little bit tufts of grass, nothing particularly, but it was kind of a dark place. And then one day I was just messing around with a little child's shovel, and I uncovered a cobblestone,
Mm.
and I started to dig around the cobblestone, and I found another one and another one. And then I realized the entire yard was cobbles. And I cleaned it all up and cleaned all of it. And
Oh,
I brought my mother out and showed her, and she couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it. I was weeping with joy.
yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. That our civilization is still there if we could still find it.
All right, John. Beautiful. I personally believe, and thank you, you just triggered something that's fixed this argument I've been trying to figure out in my back of my head. What is the liberal doing? What is the role of the liberal? The liberal's role is to call out the hypocrisy or the corruption of things as they are. But by going back to something in the past, the last thing, or something in the past that worked
The
and
arc
bringing it
Terrence
forward.
McKenna, the Archaic Revival.
Okay, wonderful.
I'll send that to you.
That,
Sorry, keep going.
yeah. That's the liberal's role. The liberal's role isn't to figure out a thing that hasn't been done before. Because, by the way, we're learning right now that the laws of thermodynamics and conservation of energy still rule all things, right?
Mm.
And to think that our ancestors, with a fraction of the tools that we have available today, built the entire world, right, are dumb or stupid. And this is the other thing, right? I was thinking about this morning as I'm thinking out a training program for modern knighthood. To think that our ancestors were brutish and stupid and violent and misogynistic and all these other things, and that maybe they weren't those things by choice, but of necessity, because those are the only ways in which to fight this insidious corruption of everything,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Like the you see one of the things that you can see in what is nowadays contemporarily called liberalism is that its primary objective is to change the
Everything.
human, change
Well,
the
it's
human.
it's to deny it's to elevate self in artificial status hierarchies so you can change your social status.
Yes,
But you
right.
have to have artificial status hierarchies to rise up in. Well, to do that, you have to deny people their access to their civilization and their individual connection with the divine and their communion with the
It
divine collectively. Mhm.
it is it not a war against the divine born of an absence of humility?
Well, that's always there. That it's hubris, right? And hubris brings nemesis, right?
Yes, because somebody once said to me, and again, because you see, you have a religious childhood, and you're grown up, and you
Uh,
pray, you go on your knees, and you know, but you don't see clearly what all these things mean until one day. I mean, I became an alcoholic, and I went to AA, and
mm,
the guys there were just, really good people, and they tried to tell me stuff, fundamental stuff about this, and about
yeah.
why do we get on our knees when we pray? What is the idea of that? Is it about the guy in the sky? No, it's not. What it's about is the demeanor that you need to adopt to be
That
totally in harmony with the world.
I pray every day, and I found myself, and I came back to God a couple years ago, and I find myself every once in a while, I will like just drop to my knees and just say a prayer, and it's more about it's the action of that. Like I said earlier, don't bend the knee on censorship, on any of that. That's good. There is something to where you're not bending the knee, so to speak. You are voluntarily accepting that there's an intricacy in divinity that is infinity. And you
You're
go,
aligned,
and I
yeah.
welcome this. I welcome the awe and the mystery, the ineffable. And it's like it's not fear, and it's also not saying I know it all. You're going, what? what are galaxies, man? Like, what is dark ma it's like a joy. It's sorry, keep going.
No, no, Tommy,
Well,
Tommy, brilliant way to bring it back. Forgive me, John. To that, I at least 20 times a day tell myself to shut the fuck up and listen.
Yeah.
And I don't talk to people very much, right? I do more of these shows than I talk to people, right? So most of the times it's me working on things or moving between things. And I tell myself probably 20 times a day to shut the fuck up and listen. John,
mm.
totally sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that is the thing. I think that we need to align ourselves, and you see, it goes also to your thing about the prince, because that comes from the same place, a refusal to
Yes.
acknowledge the greatness of another,
Yes.
even when that is deserved greatness, even when
Yes.
you're dealing with a person
Yes.
who is elevated in all of kind the ways that these guys very often were.
Yes.
Uh, and the thing about it is where all the toxicity enters into our politics is from that kind of lack of humility and the envy and the jealousy that accompanies all of this. And that brings us precisely to where we are now,
Yes.
where the world is being run by invisible dictators who are not princes. Whatever else they are not princes.
They're quite mad.
Yes, they are quite mad. And all of the hierarchy, the pyramid that comes down
They're
from this.
artificial status hierarchies. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's getting more and more toxic as it comes down. I mean,
Well,
it's
but here's what's
it,
happening. It's collapsing under thermodynamic principles. These artificial status hierarchies are viral and they can't sustain forever.
mm,
The host eventually dies and the host can no longer provide sufficient enough energy for the metabolism to occur for the virus to live off of them.
yes.
And that's what's happening societally right now. It's
But
happened to
it's all,
Russia already, China already. Yeah, terribly sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's all, this is a question for you then.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
also happened to royalty. It has also happened to monarchy in
Correct.
government. I
Correct.
mean, these are lowlifes now, most of them that we see.
Well, their museum piece is maintained, but it doesn't mean so give me 1 second. Constantine emerged from this. He had to kill the Praetorians, right?
Mhm.
Others have emerged from this. Feudalism emerged, classical feudalism emerged as the direct refutation and counter to this. And then it got corrupted in time. Why? How? One, the other thing is people need to look back at history. Very few princes, whether they're kings or nobility, survive to old age. Very
Yes.
few in history have survived to old age. They've been locked in all out contest and conflict with these oligarchs and this system and incapacities in their own families.
Okay.
Hmm.
Can we? I just want to root something here,
Yeah,
Ian,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
yeah, because it's kind of they're moving parts here, and I want to try and pin them
yeah.
down a bit. Like, let's ask a question.
Just
Can I say that I ever experienced that I met men who were great? I don't say perfect,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
who
yeah.
and women, perhaps,
The great man. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
You,
yeah,
uh, I think so. I believe so. Now, the modern kind of cynicism, which is born of liberalism, immediately, de-
Modern liberalism. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah,
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 sorry,
yeah,
it deconstructs that and says that this is all a facade,
yeah,
and
yeah,
all
yeah,
behind this they're evil and wicked and all
yeah,
these
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Now, that's I don't believe that in principle. However, I think that the world that we're talking about to a large degree has degenerated through the influence of this pseudo-liberalism into
Yes,
this
yes,
the lack of solid principle, the lack of fundamentals, the lack of true radicalism in the sense of rootedness. All of those things has brought us into a corrupted world.
but
Like
that's on the liberals. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
over the weekend, I was involved in a festival in Ireland here,
Mm,
Mishaira, which is, and one of our guests whom I interviewed on stage, was a man called John Wedger, who was a retired
mm,
Scotland Yard detective who specialised in child abuse and child trafficking
mm,
for
mm.
many years. And he tells a horrific story of the state of the United Kingdom, which is his area that he knows best. But he says that probably all European countries are
Oh
equally
yeah.
infected with this disease. And really, it's a matrix of corruption, which starts with the idea of the power, lack of control, which is handed on, and through abuse, generation upon generation, compromise, compromat. It gets into politics. Politicians then they're compromised and they become evil in their political life. And so there's a rot that is spreading through our former civilization, shall we say, or the last remnants of our civilization. Now, that is not the people say, well, that's human nature. No, it's not necessarily human nature. There is another way, and we have to kind of find the formula that will allow us to backtrack, to go back, as you say, to the point of certain solidity. You know, say at this point, we, relatively speaking, everything was okay. Now you got to also factor in that many of us have been, including me, and I say this, with no great pride, have been naive about some of the things we believed, for sure. Uh, but I don't think we're wrong about everything. I mean, when you're a child and somebody is trustworthy, an adult, by and large, you what you've learned over time about that person is true. Sometimes you're being fooled, but not often. That is not the reality. So, like our fathers, I had a good father, I had a good mother. They were good people. They went to their graves, great people. A friend of mine used to call them the great but anonymous people. And but this is the problem, you see, that all of our institutions, all of our power centers are infiltrated and infected by this disease. And this former detective talks about, I think, is a very central element of it. Very sadly, it's a terrible thing, child prostitution being used in this way. A
Yeah,
terrible
but that's 1 to
satanic institution.
3%. It's terrible, but it's 1 to 3% of the problem. The bigger problem is we live in a world of experts and you need the pedigree. That means you need to get into the right school and you need to have the right funding for the right project and then you write the papers and you do the things that then is used to promulgate all of this stuff out
Well,
there.
yeah, yeah.
Or you want wealth and so you need to work for certain firms and have a certain, you need to increase the transactions that you're responsible for over a time. So there's 3 to 5% is the compromat, and that's for the low level folks. It's all the other ways in which the other 95% of people are compromised, which are insidious, and they're only really possible in a world without princes where things are based off multi-generational relationships, and instead it's based off of your pedigree in some managerial expert system. And those folks, I watched it. I've watched
Yeah.
all this stuff happen over the last 30 years very closely, especially in Silicon Valley. When I was younger in Silicon Valley, you might have an electrical engineer, never been to school, but he worked at Intel because he was unbelievably good at some aspect of some kind of semiconductor development or electron flow understanding or radio frequency stuff. You couldn't hope to do that over the last 30 years.
You see, I'm wondering if I have felt for a long time that power has begun to repel good people.
Oh, no, no, no. It's been happening for a long time. Yes, sir.
They can't. Good people will not go to near power.
Well, it's in order to rise up in an artificial status hierarchy, you need to be artificial.
Yes, yes, that needs to be fixed because I don't immediately see, EM, the possibility that we can restore the prince to a central role in our civilization.
Where they
Not
are,
well,
they're already
not
there. They're already there. I mean, look at the United States turning around right now. There isn't a bunch of common people doing that. It's a billionaire class.
yes, but
See, mhm.
is that reliable? Are you confident that that will lead us to a better place?
Okay,
That's,
okay.
because I mean there are dangers there. We see, I've felt this for a long time. I felt what you say very strongly, and I wanted it to be true.
Mm.
Then I look at the actual some of the optics. Look at somebody like Musk. I mean, yes, he speaks very well, and he's a likable personality, and so on. And you want him to be the good guy he appears to be. But he's involved in chipping brains and in surveillance and all of the things that the bad guys want to implement.
Okay, so here's the thing though, okay? Unless we're going back to some Luddite pre-industrial, or pre-techno, pre-computer age, shall we say, really has to be computers, right? So some pre-compute, mass compute kind of state, then you have to have princes on our side that have all the latest tools and counter tools. You have to surveil your enemies and you have to be able to play that game at the highest level. Here's the issue that we have, okay? The issue that we have is that the classical liberals, and again, for me, Scottish Enlightenment, I think, was the peak, you know, liberalism was the Scottish Enlightenment, or what's called the Scottish Enlightenment. And it's what built out most of the world because most of the British Empire was actually the governors, the heads of the major organizations, institutions were almost all Scots. Or they had all gone to Scottish universities because in the 1700s and the 1800s, the best universities in the world, before the Prussian system took over, were in Scotland. So
Yes.
the liberals, we used to be the check and balance on the princes, and more importantly, not so much the princes, but the people around the princes, because that's the court, right? That's the real
Yeah.
danger. They're the ones always looking to wall the prince off, create an illusion around the prince, and then get the prince to do what they want the prince to do. So we as classical liberals understood the world of princes extraordinarily well. We had entire universities built off of that. And we
Yes.
understood all of that and how all these insidious ways in which the prince and the prince's power and the fighting that the prince does, because the prince is locked in battle every minute of the day on levels most people couldn't understand. And that was one side. The other side, though, and so we were a check and balance. Back to the journalism thing, we'd call them out. And we'd call them
Yeah.
out in a way that they couldn't hide. And more
Yes.
importantly, we rarely had to call out the prince. We called out somebody around the prince that was doing something. Now, sometimes we used the prince's name, so the prince had to look at it. Okay, that's one side. On the other side, though, what we were really doing is we were giving the people the ability to still have loyalty to their prince.
Yes.
And
Now,
at the same time, while we're doing that, we are saying the people's needs and articulating all that in as you said earlier, in the language and in the concepts and in the needs of the people. How is this impacting the people? That has to come back. This classical liberalism has got to come back, or nothing's going to change.
I agree. But just to go back to the say the Musk thing a little bit,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
not to personalize against him, because as I say I
No,
find
he's
him,
the obvious example. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
he's a charismatic individual and
yeah,
seems a lot of good qualities. That is my impression. But here's
yeah.
the point: like that, if you go back to say the mid '80s, and I've talked a lot about this recently, but
Mm,
because you see, the thing about the technology is it was never a question that there is simply a singular version of technology that would be developed.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so there were different ways it could be. I had a friend a long time ago. He's dead now. He was a guy called Mike Cooley, and he was a philosopher and technologist. And he was involved in building computers very early on for the Japanese when they were actually market leader in that area.
yeah, yeah,
And he was insistent that the world was going down the wrong path in the context of the kind of technologies that were being designed. He says that they weren't human-centered technologies, and we
yes,
needed to stop and start again. And that never happened, you see.
yeah,
And if
yeah,
you did look closely at what happened, I remember back in the mid '80s when I was editor of sort of leftish magazines. Like we were then very much one of the big themes of that time was the imminent obsolescence of humanity as a result of technology, and what that would do in relation to different under different headings. Obviously income and so on, but also dignity, human dignity, individual dignity, meaning, and all those things, and just social solidity and cohesion and those questions. And they were really up for grabs, and people were talking about them in the mid '80s. But then they stopped talking about them. And what happened was prosperity wiped the blackboard. They just said, no, no, we don't need to worry about anything because now we're rich. And that happened. It started with America in the post-Reagan boom. It came to Europe, and then it finally arrived in Ireland about 97, as known as the Celtic Tiger. And that lasted another 10 years. And then there was a few years of fighting and blaming and naming and shaming about the collapse. And by the mid teenage decade, whatever you call that, not after the noughties, uh, suddenly the guys from Silicon Valley sort of all arrived out like white smoke was seen, metaphorically, and they came out and says, "We've solved it. We've solved the riddle. We have the future, and we own it. By the way,
Yeah.
it's ours."
Okay. So, John, the lie that was agreed to, I was there at the time in Silicon Valley in some of these conversations and in the general conversation. The
Yes,
lie that was come to was that we were going to go ahead and commit to a post-labor economy
yes,
because technology was going to bring us to the place where human labor was no longer, return on labor was no longer the base of the economy.
mm,
And at the time, it was return on capital and had been since the 70s. But even that was coming to its end because you can only take so much of the future, which is what debt is. Debt is taking future life and bringing it into the present, right? The
yes,
productivity of future life. Okay. So even that we were going to move on. So there was a firm commitment to universal basic income and going all in on techno utopia.
right.
Because the closest we've been, or the closest we've got to that, um, economically, technologically, societally, et cetera, is now.
What year was that, Ian? What
This
was
is really the commitment happened in the 2010s,
right?
right? The conversations we were having them in the 90s, but the feudal, the modern techno feudalism conversations were had very seriously in the noughts, and then in the 2010s, by 2000, after the 2001 dot-com collapse, it was a commitment which wiped out Gen X's wealth production capabilities and their greatest years. There was a commitment to we're going to go ahead, we're going to go ahead and move to this techno utopia, to this new techno feudalism,
Yes,
and we're going to move to universal basic income. But here's the flaw. Humans and we're learning this. All we have to do is look at the bloody inner cities and the welfare state. Humans only determine internally their self-worth based off of their contributions to their community through labor, whether it's
yes,
intellectual labor or physical labor.
yes,
That is the only way. There is no other. We are incapable of assessing our value as a human being, our value to the community in any other way. And if you give people universal basic income, you're going to wind up with the inner cities all over the world.
yes,
People don't want that. They don't want a universal basic income. What people want is they want this covenant with the divine. They want to be connected. They want to belong. And what happens is if you take labor, intellectual or otherwise, from them, they go to tribalism as their contribution.
yes.
And now it's all out conflict and fights and wars and everything everywhere is a fight.
Just to tease that out, on the
Yeah, yeah,
universal
yeah.
basic income, I actually remember in the early 90s, and I actually thought it was a good idea. Now, I take your point because it had this benefit. At the time, if you were on social welfare, on what we call the dole, you couldn't work. You were not
Yeah, yeah,
permitted
yeah.
to work,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you were like a prisoner of your inability to get a
Circumstance.
job in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
first
yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Now, so there was a proposal then to introduce this thing called universal basic income, but that it would be a general payment to everybody, a transfer from the state to everybody. Yeah, if you were unemployed, it would be in the form of cash.
It's vote buying, but yeah. Hmm.
Well, yeah, but no, you see, it wasn't because in actual fact, the political establishments resisted it tooth and nail, and so did the economics profession, and but I believe that for the reason that it would liberate people from that I did the snooping kind of social welfare inspector, you
Mm.
know, and you could just get on. So okay, you'd get what it would be a small amount. You would get in your it would grease the wheels, enable you to pay your bills, help you to pay your bills, and then you could get on with being creative, being entrepreneurial, whatever you want to do with your life, you could get on with doing that. Now I know not everybody would take that course, but it seemed to be a much better system. Now, the problem with it now, I mean, I can't possibly agree with it now because it's now connected to control. It's control, and this is the
Well,
real demonic
I
aspect of
want
it.
to I want to disagree with that a little bit. Okay. What it was is the rent seekers trying to find a way to ensure minimum rents. And that includes government because that they get their rents in the form of taxation and licensing and fees. It was rent seekers trying to find a way to ensure that they had a fixed rent coming in that then would be cost of living adjusted every year so that the parasitic rent seekers could sustain themselves, all
Mm.
under the guise of all this other touchy-feely, nice, feel-good stuff. The other problem that you have, though, what that completely obviated is there are social hierarchies, and there is fuck all we can do about getting rid of those.
Yes.
And anybody on the dole of any kind is lowest in that social hierarchy. Now, if somebody's fallen on some hard times, absolutely, right? Somebody's fallen on hard times. They've gone through some rough times. They need a base minimum that they don't fall below, and they
Yeah.
got a time limit on that to get out. Absolutely, we need to have that safety net.
Absolutely.
Right. And we don't, if those people do have to go on and then they work their way off, we praise those people. Right.
Okay. Yes. Let's park that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
module for a moment and move back to the prince.
Yes.
And I want to just ask you, like, I don't think there are many princes in Silicon Valley,
No.
and
No.
and and nor are there in Black Rock. Uh,
Zero.
and
BlackRock,
that's what,
any of the financialist systems, these are rent-seeking systems. They have zero princes.
or the World Economic Forum or any of these things. So
Zero. That's
we're
management. Yeah, it's
yeah,
all management.
so
Yeah.
we're in the deepest trouble we've had because power and money have accrued to the worst possible clients.
But here's the benefit. It's all artificial money.
Yes,
It's all fake.
yes, it's fake, and it's based on criminality.
And it's based on criminality. Well,
It's a receipt from
it's
criminality.
parasitic. Yes.
Yeah,
It's all fake. It's all artificial. It's all a Ponzi scheme. And the thing that keeps it sustained is that the few princes that do emerge, and they're an emergent property of just existence. Think wolf packs. I mean, we are social species. We do have alphas. They're not A types. We do have, we do have the social stratas. It's organic, and nothing we've been able to do has been able to do away with that. In fact, if we do away with it, all we're left with is this total and absolute parasitism of everything, everywhere, all the time.
yeah. I think would you agree with me that Donald Trump is kind of a wounded prince?
Yes,
Like that's what he
yes,
aspires to be,
yes.
but it doesn't quite work for him. He's not.
Well,
I'm
no,
not.
no, no. It's not, well, wounded, yeah, but all princes are wounded, to be quite frank, because they are under fights that most people couldn't begin to comprehend from the moment they're born just because of their station in life, right?
Hmm.
Um,
So
truly upper crust families are absolutely horrendous to one another. Most all of them, and they're totally and absolutely horrendous to one another because if you can't survive that, you can't sustain the family's position in the world against all the things that are going to be thrown at you from internally and externally. So I wouldn't say Trump's a wounded prince. All princes are wounded deeply.
okay.
What he
But
is he's a minor prince.
yes,
He's not a
yeah,
great prince. He's a minor prince. He's more like a count than a duke.
yes. Where are the great princes?
That is a great question, and it is the thing that consumes much, my writing and my thinking. They're here. They're already here, and they're not all men, by the way, because some of them, it's
Hmm.
matriarchy. This is where another thing that we have a real problem. The real problem that we have is we have an unbelievably unhealthy matriarchy, and 80-90% of the world's wealth is either owned or controlled by women. And that's been true in the upper classes forever, in the upper middle class and the lower upper class forever. It's becoming more and more true of the middle class and the lower class. The lower class, the men are in prison or dead or have nothing. And in the middle class, it's the women with all the college, going 75% in college and all that, getting all the jobs. So
Well, you
we
see,
have, go ahead.
sorry, you see, the progressive era has left behind all of these toxic, poisonous tropes, which sound virtuous: equality, affirmative action, all these things, which are actually the problem. They're blocking
They're
the system.
poison, as you
Yeah.
said. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so here's that. Okay. I want to answer your question about where are the princes. The princes are waiting. Now, there's some of the minor princes that are in all-out war right now, and they're doing good. They're actually doing good. Not there yet, not in the UK, not in the other parts of the English-speaking world, but here they're finally starting to fight back and hold their own. The fundamental problem that we have is our matriarchs. And the problem is that most of the matriarchs we have today, their entire wealth is based off of the artificial system.
Hmm.
And they want to keep that system going to maintain their wealth and their social status. What
Well,
we need is
yeah.
and I've written about this 2 pieces already as well. And the whole novel I'm writing, As Her Own Burns, is about this very thing, right? What we need stronger matriarchs to seek out, find, and support those princes with their resources. And I'm going to use this. This is now what's missing now, just as the same as liberalism is missing now. And part of the reason these matriarchs are doing what they're doing is because they're not, it was the woman of the house that listened to the classical liberal. It was
Yes.
the man of the house that listened to the classical conservative, and it was the contestation between them, but there was a balance of power. And the balance of power is, if you look historically, and even now in most upper middle class, and upper class families, virtually all of that wealth
Yes.
and all of the relationships are the wife's.
Yeah, and it was the women who supported artists, who were
Correct.
the
Correct.
figures of artists, really, weren't
Correct.
they?
Correct.
Uh,
So, mhm.
yeah, that's you see, one of the things that troubles me greatly about the present time, and it has happened in the course of my lifetime,
Mm.
is that the adults have left the room one by one.
Yes.
Oh, the solid people that I remember who spoke very rarely, but when they spoke, it mattered. The people who you could go to, if no matter what your problem was, and they would be able to help you,
Yes.
not necessarily in a practical way, but in a way that would give you the inspiration to
So
actually help yourself,
that
whatever.
gets back to something you said very early on, has been the 30-plus-year work. Father was removed because that's father's role.
Yes, it is. And the father was silenced and turned into a kind of a fool, you know.
At every social scale, by the way, every socioeconomic scale as well, not just amongst the people.
Yes, that's right. And all this happened, and it's all part of this revolution that was going on. And now I saw recently an interview with or a piece that Victor Davis Hanson did, and he was emphasizing the fact that we are now in a counter revolution. And I thought, yes, that's right, because I think that's right in America. It's right in Ireland as well. I sense that even though it's very inchoate and very, very, flimsy and fragile, that there is a consciousness rising against what's happening. I felt that the other night in Castlebar at our meeting. There was 400 or 500 people in the room, and we were talking about really serious and sometimes dark things. But these people are up for it. They're up for this battle, and they know it's going to be rough.
So can I put it in a different term
Mm.
than counter-revolution?
Okay.
It's not a revolution. We're denying the revolution.
Okay.
It's the civilization reasserting itself.
Okay.
Because if we think and if we commune in context of a counter-revolution, we will be hijacked again. This isn't a new thing we're trying to move to. What we are trying to do, what we must try to do, and this really is, that's exactly right. And this
But
is the role
it's
of,
counter. It's a counter in that it nullifies
It
revolution.
nullifies. It's a counter. Yes, it's a counter, but it's not a counter revolution. We
Yes.
are
Yeah.
countering by restoring civilization,
Yes. Good. I like that. Yes, that's
not
right.
revolting, not revolution,
No,
because there's
no.
another piece
Yes.
there. It
You're just
gives
suggesting.
them, well, it gives them too much credit by saying counter revolution. It means they're already the power. They've already won. Oh,
And
hell no.
you're spawning a kind of permanent revolution.
Correct. Correct. Which is
Yeah.
what they want. That's their whole purpose is this
Right.
permanent revolution. No, we're not revolt. We're not in revolt. We're not in revolution. You're not in power.
It's an anti-revolution
It's an
revolution.
anti, very good. Love that. It's anti-revolution,
Yes.
right?
Well,
It's civilizational oh, I can't think the word just skipped out the other side of my bloody head.
Re
inserting itself.
It's
Reasserting.
reasserting.
Recalibration.
Reasserting is a good word. There's another word. I can't.
Reestablishing.
It's reestablishing. It's a reaffirmation of our civilization,
Yes.
right?
Um, well, this is the incredible thing, you see, that when you look at what's happening and you listen to the silence of so many people, it's like as if they know the civilization is dying or dead, and yet
But
it's
it's
not even
not.
that it's not, but they don't want to save it.
Okay, here's why. Okay, John, here's the thing. It's not dead and it's not dying because you can't kill the civilization. It's 1,000 years. Ours directly, as it is 1,000 years on. The
Yes.
communists tried to wipe out the Russian civilization. They killed tens of millions and then another 29 million in war. They killed something close to 70 million Russians trying to stamp out Russian civilization. It failed. The Chinese, Mao killed 300 million of his own people to stamp out and did the Gloria or the whatever the hell it is, right? The oh gosh, I can't remember what the term was, but they took all the books and all the histories and all the things, they burned
Great,
them.
great leap
The
forward.
the Great Leap Forward. They utterly failed because you can't, that's the thing, you can't stamp out a civilization as long it's like blockchain. As long as one token exists, it's got the record of all the other tokens and it immediately flourishes again, right? So give me 1 second. Pol Pot tried it in Cambodia, right? All these, they've always tried. So you can wipe out a culture. You can completely replace a culture. We're watching that here in America and many of our communities. We see that in the liberal world unbelievably powerfully, where our culture has been completely supplanted by insanity, by the insane. But you can't wipe out a civilization. And it's
Mm.
up to if you read, and I have read in the original document, not the original books, but the original text of the liberal discourse, really from the 1700s into the early 1800s, right? Like people need to read not Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations as the first book; they need to read Theory of Moral Sentiments first because he wrote Wealth of Nations as the response to the theory of moral sentiments, which is how we all civilizationally, emotionally conflict, and that there's this market system that we could use to kind of adjudicate these complex things. Well, the moral sentiments books is the civilization, right? Wealth of
Mm.
Nations is a way that we can better understand how we're adjudicating these things. It wasn't just about financial markets, et cetera, but it was about if you're trying to take a single communal thing that we do that props it all or sustains it all, it's economics. So let's look at that. So you can't wipe out a civilization, and we need to get that out of our head. And back to what I was saying, forgive me. If you read the original, stay away from the French. The French were nuts. The French have been nuts forever, right? We're not French. So forget Kant and Descartes and all these others. Read Locke and Hume and Spencer and these guys. Not a single one of them was calling for the tearing down of our. These are, liberals. They weren't calling. Not a single one of them was calling for the tearing down of the crown. Not a single one was talking about tearing down of our civilization or all this crazy insanity that we're talking about now. They were critiquing it, and rightfully so. But they were talking about how do we improve upon it? How do we modernize it? How do we bring it forward? Not how do we replace it? How do we supplant it? How do we revolt
Okay.
against it? How do we do all this? All that shit, by the way, forgive me, came out of the French who wanted us to destroy ourselves.
But look at it now, Ian. Look at it,
Yeah,
and ask yourself. I mean, I'm just to make the case for the
yeah, yeah,
prosecution. We know it. We know it. Like, I mean, the royal families. Let's start at the top. They're all absolute nut jobs. So then there's the wealthy class. They're completely
I disagree with
corrupted.
you. I
Hmm?
disagree with you. I've traveled with
Indeed.
some of these people. I've worked with
Uh,
some of these people
The
directly.
the monarchies,
I've
yes.
traveled with some of the royals.
And you think that there's the makings of something
They're
there.
in unkind, they're in fights that people would blow people's minds
And why are they silent?
because they don't have the, because if they don't have the people, the physical capacity of the people to defend them, they are vulnerable every minute. Their lives are vulnerable. I've talked about this called the Praetorian problem. And you
Yeah.
get bad apples, you get weak ones like Andrew, who was weak. And do you think that our image and concepts and ideas of princes hasn't been molded and shaped for hundreds of years? This whole down with princes thing's been going on for centuries. Some of those princes were actually rather solid, and they were and by his way, Michael Hudson talks to this, right? The economist Michael Hudson. Now
Hmm.
he's a bit of a Marxist, so his solutions are maybe not completely feasible. But he talks and lays it out going back 4,000 years that the only counter to this oligarchic, anti-liberal system, anti-human system, right, is
Yeah.
monarchy.
Well, you see, this is almost the paradox about this.
Yeah.
That the modern mind is unwilling to accept a leader with a crown on his head, but he but is willing to accept a guy whose pockets are bulging with fake money. And it isn't a matter of character at all. It's a matter of the
So here's how it is. It's a very simple. There was a twist. There's a twist, and us liberals missed it. Quite frank. Okay. And
Hmm.
back to the UBI thing. What we missed was that we equated the riches of the merchants and the bankers and the comforts that they provided with quality civilization, with quality leadership, never once really looking at how that was all actually being paid for. We then looked at our prince, who was compared to, these bankers and these merchants, paupers who are engaged in all of this estate management, real things, doing real things, physical things, things that had to get done
Hmm.
to manage the estate and feed all of the thousands and thousands and sometimes tens and hundreds of thousands of people on the estate and manage all the internal conflicts and all the dynamics of human population. And they were paupers in comparison. And what did
Um,
we do? We liberals bought into the illusion a century and a half, or a little more than a century and a half ago, that giving the people comforts. Meanwhile, what were we doing? We were the very people giving them comforts. We're enclosing all of the commons and removing all of the commons.
yes, it's something I call it the culture of the fat chieftain. You know, that in traditional societies, people always wanted a chieftain who was fat because they felt he could make them fat also. And that was why so we're in that culture. That is what BlackRock is.
Yes.
It is the fat chieftain in our
But
culture.
never mind that in order for that fat chieftain to be fat, 3 generations of your family is going to be impoverished and indebted.
Yes, exactly.
This is where we failed. Where we failed
This,
and we still fail is that
yes.
we are equating worth with wealth. We are worshiping wealth and not the
Okay.
divine. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
now we've sketched out the problem really quite neatly, I think.
Mm,
So what do we wind it back to? What is the bottom line, EM? How do we
okay.
start? Where do we go back? Where's number one square?
Okay,
that we
so
start.
did you ever watch the Akira Kurosawa pictures?
No.
The old samurai, black and white samurai movies from the
Yeah,
50s, early 60s, right?
mm.
Kurosawa really talked to this. Kurosawa talked to how venal and small and petty and ignorant and short-sighted and cruel and mean the peasants were. But the peasants always endure. And they keep the culture and they keep the civilization and they maintain it and they feed it and they house it and they do all this other stuff. Princes come and go. Warriors, samurai, leaders, knights come and go.
Do- Does it not come down to collective conversation?
No, it comes down to civilization. What the point is this, though, what Kurosawa was trying to say is that even though the princes and the knights, the samurais come and go, and knocked in all these big fights, without them, the people are impoverished, the people are imprisoned, the people are preyed upon. That was Kurosawa's message. And he had to be very careful because he was doing it in the 50s and 60s. But what Kurosawa was saying was exactly this, that the people have to have the great princes who are locked in these big battles, and you have to have the knights who are locked, samurai who are locked in these big battles, because without that, the people are. This is the whole story of the Seven Samurai, right?
My
Yeah,
point there was really that if you talk about the peasants as being the people who hold the civilization
yeah,
together,
yeah.
they're in a very dire straits now at this moment, I believe, because of the action of propaganda, of fake
That's
money, of
all that's failing. Where they are, John, is what's happening there in Ireland. The greatest threat to the people now is this forced immigration of people who don't belong to the civilization, and
yeah,
therefore any restoration of the civilization is going to be nearly impossible. And that's being done on purpose because
yeah.
when the people who are already there, already coming to this place of we need great men to save us, right? Or we need great men not to save us, but to protect us,
Well,
right?
this is the point.
Uh,
That there's no conversation possible between those people,
no, no.
the great but anonymous people
I've been
cannot.
trying. Yeah, yeah,
And they're meanwhile they're being diluted and divided by these incoming hordes.
yes, on
Uh,
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, on purpose. So, how to reverse this? Where do you go to say, okay, we have to, what is the tool we need to get out of the shed in order to address this?
Okay, so give me 1 second. The only thing that I can see, and again, it goes back to how did this all happen? The relationship between the great man and the people was severed on purpose and very cleverly across centuries. What
Yes.
has to happen now is that when we see take personal foibles, personal style, take the human being out of it. When you see anybody at any socioeconomic level and in any form or fashion that is genuinely fighting for our civilization, not our religion, not our those are component pieces, but our civilization, the people need to support that person. And
Yes.
and and we're at a place right now where you may need to support that person with your life and limb,
Yes.
right? Because these great people are operating in an environment where the enemy is in their own house and will kill them and does. People
Yes.
need to really truly take a look at upper crust families and how many of them die. It's a lot.
Yes.
Kids
But
kidnapped here, kids killed there, somebody's killed over there, somebody's hooked on drugs and dies of an overdose. Not maybe they didn't get themselves on drugs. This is happening all the time.
yes.
We need to if we recognize that there is somebody who is genuinely fighting for our civilization, recognizing that they are under mortal danger every minute of their life, take aside financial or economic danger,
Well, you
then we
see,
need. Mhm.
yeah, this is I go back to like the spring of 2020, and this is the thought I had right then, that what was happening would not be permitted to continue. That yeah, they would we would hear this for a few days, and then there would be an intervention by serious people who would say, "No, this isn't happening now. Stop. Everybody go back to work. Everybody forget about this. We need a new government. We can't do this." This never happened, and still
Oh, no,
hasn't
no.
happened.
Hold on, John. Hold on. Okay. In 2020, there was a whole slew of world leaders, children, and heirs who were killed. Ray Dalio's eldest son was killed. Well, he died in a car crash. Months
Uh,
after his middle son was hit and run in downtown New York and almost killed him. I know Paul. Paul was in the hospital for 6 months trying to survive. And then when he didn't die, his older brother died in a car crash. And David Rothschild, the heir, he died suddenly at 54 years of age, 54, I think, of a sudden heart attack, no heart hit conditions.
well, see,
These
Rothschild
weren't
is
the only ones. This
yeah.
happened all over.
Just by the by, Rothschild is a name that you constantly hear
Yeah.
mentioned in a very malign context. Um, is that part of what we're dealing with, or is it not? Is it part?
They are controlled. People have got to think about the Roman Empire was owned and controlled by the Praetorians, not by the emperors. There was no emperor from between Augustus and Constantine. There was no emperor in the Roman Empire that had any real power.
Which
Not
is
even
in,
Marcus Aurelius. hmm
yeah, all
Because
of
they had
these,
knives. Yeah. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
all of this is clearly there's something here. There's a pattern. I can see the shadows of it, but at the same time, it's a mess. It's
Yes.
it's there's no part of it that you could start from that you would say, okay, this is solid, this is working, and then so where do we begin, and who is the we that would do the beginning?
Okay. Okay. First and foremost, the thing that we are preserving, that we must all, no matter what our status and social class, no matter what our station in life is, we are all, we must all live our lives in defense of our civilization. That's
Yeah,
primary because that is our 1,000 year on direct, unbroken covenant with one another and through that, the divine. Our
yeah,
civilization is that complex thing that keeps these types of things from happening. And when they do happen, allows us that place to go back to that we can reset. That's first. What is the master? The master is not wealth. That is a servant. The master, our wealth, that's not our master. We can rebuild wealth. We can build real wealth. The
yeah.
master is our civilization. That's first piece. The second piece is then no matter what somebody's station is, if they are in defense, genuinely in defense of that civilization, the English for us, I can't worry about Europeans. I can't worry about anybody else in the world because that's not my people, not my civilization, not my problem.
No,
But any of us from the English speaking world, the classical English speaking world, which most certainly includes you Irish, right? You guys are card carrying founding members,
yes.
right? Now, you're redheaded, ugly stepchildren, but no. um, um, we,
Yeah,
was that?
we've drifted a long way from that the island of saints and scholars, it's
Yes,
it's very sad,
but they're
and to
still
see
there. They're
we're still
still
here,
there.
but
Yeah.
you get like we suffer really abominably from that, the absence of adults.
Well, that's not what we suffer from. What we suffer from is healthy matriarchs who believe that their civilization fucking matters. Us men can talk all we want, and we'll do, right? The thing there in Ireland, those young men will go to blood in an instant. The young Irish lads will go to blood in an instant, but they need the women to give them permission to do so because the women control the incentive structures.
That's very true. Yeah, it's very true. There's always that. There used to be that woman in the room
Yeah.
whom, when she spoke, the room would fall silent, and everybody would look to her, all the men as well,
Yes.
and they would listen,
Yes.
and she would, and she would be reasoned, but she would be firm,
Yes.
she would be unapologetic
Yes.
and clear.
Yes.
an action would take place on foot
Yes.
of what they said.
Yes.
It's true. It's so true. And those women again have disappeared. And the strange thing about it is that they disappeared in a time when they were supposed to be empowered. They
Okay.
were really
Now,
empowered. But
John, back to our fault, us liberals. We failed them because we were
yes,
supposed to be advising and guiding them.
yes.
We were not guiding. We were supposed to be their advisors. And we fell for all the illusions and the
And,
lies and the
and
bullshit.
they're protectors
Correct.
when they needed that.
Correct.
Yes,
Correct. In the world of man, right?
yes.
With other men. We needed to be able to say, no, this is right.
You see, this is the thing that the oversimplification of the descriptions of society and how it worked have actually caused this all of this to happen.
Correct. Correct.
It, women didn't need to be liberated. They
No.
already were
Yes.
liberated. Many of those
They
women were.
already owned the world. They already
Yeah,
owned it. Yes.
you see, this is the thing. One of the reasons that well, had whatever I had, recklessness or courage to get involved in all that, gender or whatever feminist thing way back was that my headmistress in school was a woman called Mary O'Flanagan, who
Mhm.
was the niece of a priest who had been this priest of the rising, the revolution in Ireland, and she was like absolutely unequivocal woman. I mean, the idea you couldn't possibly meet her and think that women had been subjugated. It would have been an absurd notion in her company. She was so forceful, so clear, so intelligent, and so good in the
Yes.
most rigorous
And
way.
well, it's same with my mother. Now, my mother was also, well, I want to be careful. My mother's still alive, and I don't want to disrespect, and I don't want to disrespect her anyways, but I also don't want to disrespect her publicly in any way.
I understand
Um,
that, and and
or implication of it, right? But my mother's one of those still alive, unbelievably strong, unreal educated, unreal connected, old family woman. No nonsense. Now, unfortunately, lots of conflicts and things in her family from her own mother broke her. But point is that we failed. We
so
failed them.
so where we're going again, and
Hmm.
when looking for that bottom square, the first,
Yeah,
it's that there needs to be a total rewriting of history.
not a rewriting, a restoration again, right? Because
Okay.
right, revolution, rewrite this.
Fair enough.
No, 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 no. We need
Yeah.
to restore history. And oh, by the way, crazy thing is, it's right there. It's in the genetic record. I mean, it's literally in the genes,
Yes.
right? Now, you'll get a proliferation of an XY chromosome because males are more prolific with more women, et cetera. But that mitochondrial DNA, that's a pretty direct line. And it passes from mother to daughter to daughter to daughter to daughter, unbroken, way longer than male, right?
Hmm.
Son to father to son to son to son. Those rarely go more than 4, 5, 6, 7 generations at the most. And we wonder about some of those where the mother might not have gotten pregnant by somebody else, right? So, but the mother to daughter is an unbroken line. And the oldest families in the world are all, without exception, and long farther than any patrilineal lines, are all matrilineal.
Wow.
And some of the, there's something like five old European families, mother matrilineal families that are basically the wives of 80% of the houses of Europe and the United States.
What I'm thinking, listening to what you're saying, and
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of it, a lot of sense in it. But what I'm coming to is really the idea that that restoration may only be possible after an extreme calamity.
It might be. The reason is that the thing that our enemies, our shared enemies, these financialists did, is they made sure that these matrilineal families, the matriarchies, are fully economically benefiting from the artificial slaver system.
Hmm.
And then in every way possible, they're keeping the truth of how that wealth is actually created from them.
Yes, yes.
And It
So
may be, it may
they're
be that,
compromised.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's exactly it, right? That's the real compromise. You're
Yes.
benefiting from a system in some way that you don't want to know the truth of.
Well, you see, yeah. I mean, once you agreed you don't want to allow deficit budgeting to happen, all this was writ
Well, the
because
moment we allowed derivatives and for stock companies and some things that are sophisticated, et cetera, but once we allowed the Venetian become Amsterdam, become City of London system to be believed as the wealth of the, these artificial currencies, these artificial um, wealth creation instruments as reality. Once we gave them magic of reality, we were lost.
we talk
Yeah.
talk about compromise. All of us
Yes.
who live in this world cannot avoid that we are the victims of compromise because
Yes.
we're living off
Yes.
we're living off the work of people who have not yet been born.
Yes. Yes. We are all living in a system now in which we have stolen from three generations, maybe five yet to be born. And we don't want to know that. We don't want to admit that,
Yeah.
right? This
It's
is the thing that liberalism needs. We have got to restore classical liberalism because it was the check and balance. Mhm.
yes, but to go back, yes, that's but to go back to that thought and to look at it again and say
Yes.
that is the explanation for the viciousness, the cruelty that we've seen in recent years coming from the political classes of all the countries in the West, in the former free West, free world, that they know that this is absolutely unsustainable. They know it's going to collapse. They know that they're
Oh, it already
next,
has collapsed. Yes.
yeah, or they're
Yeah.
next on the block when this emerges in full.
Well, they want to make sure they're the last ones to starve.
Yes.
So they'll steal, right? This is what happens when regimes collapse. And it collapsed somewhere between 2009, 2012. It collapsed. The final collapse started in 2000, 2001. But the final collapse happened. And then it was just the coup de grace was 2020, 2019, 20 into 2022, right? What happens at the end of regimes is the managerial class on behalf of themselves and the ownership class steals absolutely every fucking thing they can on their way out the door before the lights go out.
Okay. I'm going to have to go soon now,
Yeah,
Ian,
yeah, yeah.
but I want to just finish on a slightly comical note in a way because
Mm,
this is I want to put something to you now which I hate people putting to me at the end of any discussion.
mm,
And that is, when you've set out things, you've said this is the story. I hope I have sufficiently dismayed everybody in order to and so on. But then they say to you, "Well, have you anything positive or hopeful to tell us?" And I don't at this moment have anything in that I can say other than that we continue to resist what is happening to us.
Okay.
Beyond and that's a
Mhm.
kind of a negative, isn't it?
Well, I
You
have a
know,
positive. I have a
okay,
positive, John.
yeah.
Genuinely, I am very positive. I actually believe
Yeah,
fundamentally,
I think your mic turned off. You sound distant.
is it on? Is it better now?
Yeah, no,
No.
I think okay.
No, but we
Yeah,
can
so
still hear you. Keep going.
Yeah, the old one
No, don't
for
worry about
sure
it. Keep
might.
going. Keep
Okay.
going.
Give me a second. I am absolutely certain we're going to make it through. It's going to take, and here's why. You can't kill our civilization, and you can't even dilute it out of existence by flooding us with all these people. Now we're going to have to get rid of them one way or another. And I don't think that's going to go well. So what? But you can't kill a civilization, and we are a civilizational people.
I'm not sure that I can see that so clearly. I hope it's true. I would love it to be true. But when I see the power of the forces, the demonic forces that are marshaled against us in the context of behavioral sciences and propaganda and groupthink and all these sinister devices that people are not recognizable as the people that we're kind of talking about fundamentally, foundationally. That they're a different breed in general, and
I
particularly the people.
okay, I'm going to disagree with that.
Okay.
Right? That is true in the managerial class, which includes the entertainers, whether they're in media or journalism or movies. It's in of those people of this artificial status hierarchy, that's absolutely true. But there's enough original stock and good solid stock at every socioeconomic class that we're still here. Now we might have to pull back for a while and let the cities burn and let some things happen. Right? Maybe we'll respond. I'm praying we respond. It'll be bloody, it'll be short. Otherwise, it's a longer, drag out slog. But there's enough original stock. There's enough of us. We've been through this before. That's the thing about civilizations. We survived the Normans.
Yes.
Before that, we survived the Anglo-Saxons. Before that, we survived the Romans. Right? So,
Well, it's more complicated because I was the Normans. Like I came over with the Normans.
well,
I
that's
think my people.
same with me. Right? My family on both sides are Scandinavian Normans on both sides.
Yes.
Right? But my adopted family, Burlingame, is an old Saxon name.
Yes.
And the original family is still there in the Midlands.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
they're original stock Americans. They got here in the 1850s or 1650s.
Yeah. But even the people who came, I mean, the Normans came to Ireland, and the line about the Normans, which has come down to us through the centuries, is that they became more Irish than the Irish because they loved Ireland and loved Irish culture so much that they enhanced it by their contributions. And I think that's certainly the case. Um,
Same with
and
England.
and
Same
of course,
with
all these arguments again are being spuriously marshaled in order to justify, as if it could be justified, what is happening now, because it has nothing to do with any of that.
But
Uh,
here's the thing, the Normans were Scandinavian, not French. They were Scandinavians, and they were more like the native peoples in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, etc., because we'd had the Danelaw and we'd had the Vikings there for centuries. And, we co-developed with these, Northern Atlantic peoples.
yes.
That's very different than what's happening today. But just as so it is very different than what's happening today. I agree with that. But point being is that our civilization has survived. Our peoples have survived for 2,000 years despite invasions, despite influx of foreigners. Right? Now, this might be the first time since the Danes, since the 700s into the 1100s, where, well, Hardrada was the last. So 700s into 1000-ish AD, where it isn't a people that are coming in that are going to become more like us, because they are basically already like us. They already come from our countries and places, etc. And it might be a place where we're going to have to fight and throw this off. But the point is, our civilization is going to survive. The enemies of humanity, particularly the enemies of the English-speaking peoples, don't understand how powerful a civilization is. And if you want an example of how powerful one is, look at what the Russians survived in the last century, and look at what the Chinese survived in the last century.
Well, one certainly a way into that idea, from my point of view, I think would be a thought that you can certainly say about the individual human being, the average human being, that they put up with a lot of abuse. They can endure a lot of suffering, but there's always a tipping point. And when they reach that tipping point, they become a different person.
Yes.
And that really, what the moment you're thinking about, maybe the aggregate of all of that in a people, in a civilization, which is like an amalgam of nations, and maybe that's the moment we're hanging in for. Certainly, I can't say that I would be optimistic today that it's imminent, that moment, but I can't rule out that it is possible and that it is there in potential, waiting for us to to join it?
It's going to happen when these things happen, that liminal state. I think we're in a liminal state. We're not exactly what we were before. We're not yet what we're going to become. We're in a liminal state. We've been in a liminal state since the 90s, the early 90s. What's going to be that flash final conversion to the next full phase finalize the phase transition to what we are next is our women. Our lower class and many of our middle class women are already there. It's the upper class women, truly upper class, not the lower upper class and not the upper middle class, although some of those are necessary too. But it's going to be our women of status that make the decision that our civilization matters, our people matter, and no more of this nonsense. When that happens, everything will change. If that happens, everything will change dramatically, rather quickly.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope, Ian.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the conversation, and thank you to our friend for hosting
man.
us.
No, dude. Honestly, these are sometimes my favorites when I get multiple guests together, and I just sit here and I watch, and then I hit a moment where I am right now, where I realize I'm the host, and I'm like, oh fuck yeah, we'll wrap it up. Like I'm like watching, I'm like that was good, and then everyone gets quiet. I'm like oh, so yeah, we'll wrap it up. But yeah, man, thank you both for doing this, and
Thank
John,
you for having us, Thomas.
absolutely, John. If you could send me the links to your stuff like immediately after this, so I can put it in the description.
Okay.
And then I will send you the link to this when it is uploaded. But yeah, both of you guys, thank you
I'll
so
do it
much.
straight away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
love to
appreciate
have you
it.
guys back on. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
All right,
John,
ciao,
always
man.
a pleasure.
Thank you, Ian.
All
See
right,
you
guys,
soon.
take care.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for